folks. You're listening to the Jobs Podcast. I am your host, Tim Hendricks. Your time is valuable. I'm not going to waste it. Let's get right to the interview. Hey, folks. You're listening to the Jobs Podcast. I am your host, Tim Hendricks. Today, we have a rather unique interview. We've got Chase with us. He started as a Boilermaker, and he shifted gears into a really unique company, and I'm not going to spoil the surprise. I'm going to let him tell you what it is. But welcome, Chase. Thanks for joining me on the Jobs Podcast.
Hey, thanks, Tim.
So let's go ahead and dive right in like we always do. Start with your childhood story. Give us a little history of Chase, where you were born, family, all that good stuff.
So I was born in Willow Springs, Missouri. Just a farm kid, country kid, born and raised right here in the heart of the Ozarks. Went to school at Willow Springs, K through 12. Was just a homeboy, so to speak. Just an 80s baby. Kind of your same country lifestyle kid, had a great family life growing up, we was involved in church my whole life, and just kind of had that whole good family atmosphere all the way through.
Okay. Where did you shift gears? You went to college then, I assume, or did you do the trade school, or kind of how was your education started after you went through the obligatory high school and all that stuff?
So kind of growing up, I mean, I was big into football, and that was a way of life, where we grew up, and I wanted to pursue that and go play college ball, and I blew my knee out and kind of got scared, essentially, so to speak, and kind of just changed directions. As I say, God always has a bigger plan than we do, but kind of changed directions. Went to a trade school, Ozark Technical Community College at Springfield. Lived with my best friend and his wife, which I've called her my sister our whole life. But we kind of had that trio lifestyle going through college, and it was rather fun. Kind of went from there, and then essentially just kind of petered out on college, phased out, however you want to say it. And I had an opportunity to get in the Boilermaker trade, which is a unique trade in itself, and I was based out of Kansas City, Union side. And, the cool thing about a Boilermaker is, it's the only trade in the world that is built from the top down, meaning, the structure is built and then the boiler is suspended off of hangers off the top. And so as it heats up, it grows. And that's kind of a unique trade in itself.
But, I've heard a lot of people that talk about being a Boilermaker, and I understand in general what it is. But for those listening, can you elaborate on where do Boilermakers typically work? What type of work do they typically do? Is there one line of work that everybody kind of does, or how do you work your way up the hierarchy of the Boilermaker career?
So the Boilermakers, there's several fields of Boilermakers. I was in the coal-fired industry, so power plants. Essentially, when you hear the name power plants, that comes with a lot of terms of different union trades. Mm-hmm. You have pipe fitters, millwrights, carpenters, iron workers, Boilermakers. There's a lot of those trades that have to come together to make those jobs work, so to speak.
Okay.
But, then you have your nuclear power plants, and you have trash burners like they have in Hawaii and stuff like that. And then, of course, you have your refineries, too, that refine your oil. That's all boiler work.
Okay.
Anything that essentially has a working boiler for the power plant side is, generally speaking, of Boilermaker work. It's a dirty job. It's a good job. There's a good group of guys. I really enjoyed the work, but it was the travel. As I've joked, and as I've gotten older, as I've joked about it, I've said, it's more of a single man, young man's career job. When you get married and get serious and have kids, and there's guys that I know that's made a career out of it, made it work really well. I just wasn't one of those guys. I couldn't manage, being away from my family like that all the time.
Do they typically have it might depend on the job, but what types of stretches are you gone? Is it 2 weeks, 4 weeks? Do they have a kind of like a rotating time off, time on kind of thing?
So a lot of their stuff kind of, they call it turnarounds,
Okay.
so during peak energy seasons, they don't want to shut power plants down at all because of course they're meeting demand on power. But in the off season, they'll shut them down. A lot of times it was around 8 weeks on a bigger outage or turnaround. So they'd shut the power plant down, and a group of Boilermakers and iron workers. I mean, you'd have several groups come in, and they would shut it down, and you would go in, and so essentially most of the time you was gone 6 to 8 weeks. And then when you moved up into the foreman and pushing work and stuff like that, you'd come in a little sooner, 2 weeks beforehand, and then leave 2 weeks afterhand. And sometimes that 8 weeks turned into 12 weeks. And it was a lot of that work is 7 days a week, or was at the time. I mean, of course, then I got in on the new construction jobs, and that was 5 days a week and clean work, and nothing dirty and nasty as bad.
Yeah.
But
What
nonetheless, it was a great career jumpstart.
you're doing? Am I correct in that you're doing a lot of welding when you're working as a Boilermaker? Is that the?
Very
Is
much
that
so.
the?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's the
So,
bulk of your.
and of course, I grew up kind of back to how I grew up here.
Mhm.
My dad was a bridge builder for 43 years and retired,
Okay.
and so I grew up in the construction industry, dirt work and bridge work. And so I've been around cranes and heavy equipment all my life, and I've been obsessed with it my entire life. And so, when I got into the Boilermakers, I got in what they call a high rigger, which is one of the guys that does a lot of your rigging to get your tube panels and stuff like that in place. And you get to go do the fun work. You get to figure out how to rig something up right and properly, and put it in place without killing people. And of course, you got to have good operators to work on
Yeah.
your side too. But
Yeah. What is the education like? You said you went to OTC, and do they have a program for Boilermakers or?
no, no. So essentially, no. I went to. I kind of started off when I actually went to college. Kind of had a few different venues I was going to go. One kind of being a construction management degree. I tossed along. I was kind of one of those kids that I wanted to go to college, but I really wanted to go to college to play football. And then
Okay.
after that kind of fizzled out, I just went to college to continue my education, so to speak. And of
Mm.
course, my best friend, I'm gonna name drop him here a little bit. Tommy Shaw, he's a stud, man. We grew up together, and he was dead set on being a firefighter from day one.
Mhm.
And we was junior firefighters at Will Springs together, and really enjoyed it as well. And he had a different passion that you just can't. You either have or you don't have. But and I kind of thought I might want to pursue that too. And again, just one of those things I kind of fizzled out on because I just didn't see myself doing that for the rest of my life. And so kind of went a different direction, but just a little short of having my degree, but that's okay. Life had other plans, and it's worked out really good for me and my family. And we've made a run at it,
Sure.
kind of went I tell people we kind of went where God told us to go.
How what's what's the start? So you've decided you're going to be a Boilermaker. Where do you apply for that? How do you get the training for that? Do they do a lot of on the job training, or is there certifications that you have to get, like, is it just welding school, or walk me through how that kind of played out?
So yeah, a lot of guys. There's a few ways.
Okay.
So me myself, I didn't have to go through welding school. I was fortunate coming out of the recession time in 2007, 2008 era, somewhere in there,
Mhm.
in that time frame. Coming back out of it, of course, there was a lot of boiler work. New builds was going on, a lot of construction, and that generational gap had really hit hard at that point. And so, with going with the union side, I went to local 83 out of Kansas City, applied, and basically they had at that time a pre-apprenticeship program. Do you have experience? No, I didn't have any experience. To kind of give them the rundown of kind of my backstory there. And so they put me to work on a pre-apprenticeship program. And then I worked up until I got available to join the apprenticeship program. And they do their own trade program, and you do 4 years of it, and there's X amount, 6,000 hours, or was at the time. you had to work under this apprenticeship program, and you move up in sections, and they cut your pay, and I mean, you have to stay on task to get more money, of course, and so I mean, it makes you work hard for them too, and it's not per company, it's just per your apprenticeship. And you might
Okay.
work for numerous companies, or you might have a company you really like and they really like you and they'll use you all the time. That happens too. But just and then some of the guys, they go to like a welding school, a good welding institute. They'll get a welding degree, and and a lot of them guys will have connections with either the Boilermakers or pipeline, and there's a lot of different venues for the weld trade. Some of them guys, they end up just coming right in and going right to work in the Boilermakers, and some of them will go through the apprenticeship as well. Just because you can weld don't mean you know how to do all the work.
Right.
And there's a lot more appreciation from the older generation when you go through an apprenticeship program. They say you're doing it the right way.
Okay.
And it's just kind of going through. The best way I can explain it to a lot of people is it's that greenhorn phase. You got to go. I remember when I got in FFA and my freshman year in high school. We had to do the green hand. Use the young buck. And it comes with a lot of tasks and training and exercises and just a lot of repetitive motion. But you got to do it right, or you can kill yourself or a lot of other guys around you real fast.
You're kind of earning your stripes when you're going through that.
Very much so.
Okay.
And then when you top out, you become a journeyman Boilermaker. And that's the end goal for a lot of guys. And that's again kind of doing it the right way. And that's something that nobody can ever take away from me. I went through the apprenticeship. I got the journeyman Boilermaker card. I withdrew all that when I kind of moved on to my next phase of life. But that's something I'm proud of. I enjoyed the work. I have a lot of good friends that still work in that industry. Some's retired. Some still work, and some run big work. And I've had a few of my buddies still call. And, you ready to come work yet? No, I miss the work and I miss you, but no, I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
Just
What kind of if someone starts in on the Boilermaker career, can you give me some ballpark as far as what the pay? You always hear that Boilermakers can make good money. I think that comes with a price when you were talking about being gone from your family. If you do have a family and you have to travel quite a bit, but is the flip side of that you're paid pretty well?
you're going to make, if you're not scared of traveling and you're not scared of work. My philosophy was if I was out of town, wasn't with my family, I wanted to work. So I was that guy. You're
Yeah.
offering me 7 days a week, 12-hour days. I'm in. I'm going to do it because I'm out of
Right.
town anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make the money. And yeah, the Boilermakers, that's one thing that I will say, that they'll give you a jump start on it. It's really good pay. You're going to work for it. Your body's going to suffer some. You're going to get in some tight holes. You're going to get in some dirty work. You're going to get in some dirty places. You're going to be 200 foot in the air sometimes. It's not for the faint of heart, but it's also very rewarding. And it has a very good pension. It has annuity and a pension program. It that's something else. Since I'm vested in the Boilermakers, and since I worked long enough to get vested, I've got a retirement program through them. So I was kind of something that helped too.
Sure.
But the guys coming in, you can be that guy that makes $50,000 a year in the Boilermakers and has some insurance, or you can be that guy that makes $150,000 a year and has some really good insurance. The
Right.
insurance is based on hours worked and stuff. Again, I've been out long enough now that may be different some now, but I'm proud of that trade. I mean, and it's based basically on how much you want to work and how much you want to travel.
Okay.
You can make $1,000 a week. You can make $3,000 a week.
Right.
And if you want to hit outage to outage to outage and go back to back to back and stay gone and work, yeah, I think them guys are out there that knock down 200,000 a year. I mean, I'm sure there's I've known a lot of guys that they get in where they had to buy new stuff all the time. I mean, it's just like they kept stuff paid for. And I had a different goal.
Sure.
But and I mean, and if you know somebody, that's kind of the loophole. If you know somebody that's in the trade, that knows a business agent or somebody well at the union hall that can get your foot in the door. I mean, um, one of the things that I kind of wish they did a little more of, and maybe they do. Maybe I've been out of pocket enough on it, but reaching out to Boilermakers and having come to like your ag classes and stuff like that, talking to these guys, and because I mean, not everybody needs a college degree, and I say that we need working class Americans too, and
Sure.
I'm not to upset people or nothing like that. Education is great, but a trade education is just as important, to the way of our life. And I mean, every time I'm kind of very humbled by the fact that every time I turn a light switch, I know where that energy and that power comes from
Right.
because I was on the other end of it for some time, and I get to understand that. And, it takes a unique group of individuals, just like with other trades. I mean, it's just as important.
I I can really relate to that. I've been out in the fire engine when the storms come through, the ice storms, the tornadoes, high winds, whatever. And then you see those guys, there's no power. You see those guys up in that bucket and they're touching those power lines, which I would never do that. You couldn't pay me to do that. But that's where your electricity comes from. Those guys are working to keep your lights on, to keep your heat or your air conditioning on. Sometimes we forget that, there's industry behind what allows our lives to continue and be relatively comfortable in the United States anyway.
Very much so. And I
Yeah.
mean, there's I've said for a long time, your service linemen, your electrical linemen, your firefighters,
Mm.
your police force, all those industries are superb to, they don't get paid enough for what they do. I mean, all them guys literally put their lives on the line on a daily basis. I feel like, and they're not appreciated well enough. Like I say, I've got some really good friends. It's some really good dang firefighters. And my hat's off to them all the time. Just very humbling to know. Once you kind of step away and kind of just remove yourself from the picture to think about what makes the world go round. It's
Yeah.
kind of unique.
Hmm. I was reading an article here recently. It was talking about the next group of millionaires are going to be HVAC folks and plumbers.
you know,
And having paid some of those guys, I believe it because, people are going to cut a lot of things when the money gets tight, but they're not going to cut their plumbing. You got to have working toilets and drains, and you got to have HVAC, and they're going
those
to pay for
luxuries.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. We've kind of crippled ourselves, but we don't know how to live without them.
I know.
Um,
Yeah. So you're through the Boilermaker. You've decided that you're going to change careers, or how did the leaving the Boilermaker career and moving on to your next one play out?
so that's definitely where I've got to say a very humbling experience. My daughter come along in 2010. My wife and I got married. A lovely lady. Of course, today is my anniversary. Anyway, by the
Oh,
way,
happy anniversary.
thank you. And yeah, we my daughter come along in 2010, and I knew when she came that that I was going to be wanting to be home.
Yeah.
Because in that industry, you're going to miss a lot. We tried. I had a lot of buddies at the co-op. I thought I could get a job at the co-op. Tried. I was that guy that called every Monday morning. Just I done a lot of things that, of course, I had based my lifestyle our lifestyle a little bit differently because of we was used to making good money, and
Hmm.
of course, you got to make good money to when you have those habits, and
Yeah.
anyway, so tried to find a comfortable mediocre place to go with, and um, tried a few different venues, and just nothing seemed to work, and this is where I got to say I go back to just doing things on God's time instead of mine, and it's I can kind of laugh about it now, and I remember I was working in Lacine, Kansas, and I tell people if you've ever been to Lacine, Kansas, you've experienced the coldest place on earth.
Well, there's nothing to
It's
stop the wind, is there?
oh, it's cold. Yes, that's exactly right. We was out there. I went out there the week of Thanksgiving, and I worked through. I got laid off out there on Valentine's Day, so I was there essentially the hard part of winter in
Hmm.
Lacey, Kansas. And we had a big outage going on out there, and my wife and daughter come and seen me. And while they was there, my daughter got a double ear infection, and we took her to the hospital, and we're new parents, and we didn't know what to do, and nothing was working. Just the whole 9 yards. And when they had to leave that next Monday, it absolutely ripped my heart out. And just watching my wife and my baby girl leave, and knowing I could do nothing for her. And
Hmm.
so I knew then that if in any way possible, I was going to come home. That was at that point that became my new goal. And we prayed diligently about it, and we was pretty adamant about it, and we tried a lot of different options, and expressed to a lot of other people. And I had a few job offers, and just nothing seemed to fit the bill, so to speak. And so I kind of got back to thinking of what I grow up doing. What have I always had a passion for, and what have I always done that I enjoyed doing. And so my brother and I being the only two sons, my parents, our parents, and we both, our dad gave us a trade as a trade skill of dirt work and concrete work growing up as a bridge builder's son.
Hmm.
And he gave us that, and he gave us work ethic and that. And so my venue become, I can't find what I want to do, so why don't I just do what I want to do? And and I will say this first and foremost: without the help of God, it wasn't possible. And He kind of paved the way, and things happened that I can't explain. Honestly, I bought a piece of equipment. It was real easy. It actually just literally fell in my lap. I bought a little dump truck. Kind of just went to work for myself, and I knew people. Growing up in the small rural area that we did, I didn't have any problem. Yes, we made some sacrifices, and yes, it wasn't just easy. Um, but it just but I knew going forward that wasn't where the end was. That wasn't where we was going to be.
Yeah.
That was a stepping stone. That was getting me home.
Hmm.
And I'll be the first to tell everybody, and I'm not bashful about it. My wife made lots of sacrifices when I come home to work. And I'm grateful for her for that. I mean, it was a total life adjustment. She had raised our daughter for 4.5 years by herself, in a lot of ways without me being here because of work. And of course, I come home and I'm in the middle of their regular routine, so it changed things, and just and we overcame and adapted, and just kind of kept staying the course, and knowing that growing up, like I say, the the upbringing we had, I knew concrete was going to be in the future, and I kind of had a plan for that, kind of going forward. I enjoy dirt work. I don't do it anymore. My brother's been working for himself for about 20 years now. He went full fledged dirt work, and he we just kind of went back to what we knew, and so kind of going forward, I worked dirt work full time by myself, and I had a couple of guys come and go, and we done some big projects, stuff like that. But um, we pursued another venue for quite some time. And
What when you say dirt work, I want to dig into that just a little bit. No pun intended there.
Okay, okay, yeah,
Are you talking about skid steers, excavators, backhoes, that kind of a thing?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I really started out more so just residential work,
Okay.
septic systems,
Oh, sure.
crawl spaces, basements,
Right.
uh, some gravel hauling,
Hmm.
driveway work, stuff like that. And then of course with the knowledge and of how to lay out stuff and doing stuff such as that, we dove into a little bit deeper stuff. We done some church project, and we done some big parking lots and done some big pads, some commercial pads and stuff like that. I mean, we kind of ranged all over the place. And of course, I had an uncle that was big in the area. He had done backhoe, just basically a backhoe business forever.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got quite a bit of my family. We've kind of all been in dirt work, your general excavation and site prepping and stuff like that. And of course, with that kind of comes territorial too. I mean, you kind of when you start doing work and getting your name out there and building the clientele, of course you want to keep it. So I mean, it's based on how well you perform.
Yeah.
Of course, I mean, yes, when you do that. So I mean, yeah, we had excavators and dump trucks and skid steers and kind of the whole rigmarole. We run some track loaders and stuff like that. Of course, it's a great, unique business in its own too. And I urge that'll see, to me, when you're in that business, that'll see kind of how well you're driven. Because it's you got to maintain your stuff. You kind of got to do it all, and
Yeah.
and if you don't, of course, you're not going to have anything to operate. And then comes with the other side. You kind of got to have some good public relations. You'll be able to talk to people. You got to be able to kind of sell yourself, so to speak. And sometimes you got to take a butt chewing, and just because you wasn't, you just didn't do it. Might have done it right in your own mind, but may not done it how the homeowner, or the owner wanted you to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
and it's really hard to just take it and go on. Well, I'll do it better. I mean, and you do that. And you just kind of learn to overcome and adapt to that environment.
Thick skin. You got to have that in business, pretty much in any business. I think,
Absolutely. And that's I think there again, I think some people are born with that.
Yeah.
And I think some of them have to learn it the hard way, and I'm probably one of them that had to learn it the hard way.
Well, not to get on my soapbox, but I think fathers are fathers have taken a beating in my adult life as far as just their value in raising young people. And father is going to shoot straight with you, or they should. And a lot of times they're not going to coddle you, or they shouldn't anyway. They're going to tell you what you need to hear because they care about your success in the future. And I'm not doing my child any favors by sugarcoating stuff.
Absolutely.
And so if a father will kind of hammer on you a couple of times when you're younger and go, hey, you need to remain humble and work hard. You talked about the maintenance of your equipment and things. A lot of people just think, well, every kid loves to sit there and basically run a tank like a skid steer, the controls. I mean, the first time I drove a fire engine, you couldn't get the smile off my face because I think a lot of guys just like that kind of stuff. But that's the flashy stuff, the greasing of the zerks, the changing of the oil, the maintenance, all that kind of stuff is the boring stuff that costs money, but that's what keeps the business running.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and I stress with people, you got to treat a business like that, kind of like you do in life. I mean, you got to do the behind the scenes things to make it work when everybody's watching.
You mentioned your reputation, the people skills and the marketing. Some of the guys I know, they never advertise and they have more work than they know what to do with.
Yeah.
Because their reputation is this guy does quality work and it just gets around, and then you're busy all the time.
Yeah. I learned real early that, you can do all the advertising in the world.
Yeah.
And people might, they might wear your t-shirt, they might wear your hat. Even like, especially if you got a good branded logo or something like that, but that don't mean they'll use you.
Sure.
And so, I mean, kind of one of the, and I'm going to screw this up probably because I'm doing it off the seat of my pants, but you get one person to say kind of ill things of you or your business that you done them wrong. It'll affect 10 people.
Yes.
And it may take 10 people that says you done good work to affect one person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the way of life, unfortunately. But, you kind of got to live by that motto. I mean, you got to, and yes, I know you can't please everybody. And I get frustrated and say, I don't want to please everybody, but at the end of the day, I really do. I want to know that I've done the best of my ability to do whatever I'm doing
Hmm.
at the time, and I want not necessarily people to think proudly of me, but I want people to be appreciative of the service we provided,
Yeah.
um, more so than anything, just that's kind of the end result or end game, to me, in a lot of ways of business.
Yeah. I
'Cause I
mean,
think,
you are an entrepreneur. You run your own business. Let's go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. What
okay.
advice, if you have someone that comes to you and said, "Hey, I want to do what you're doing right now," which we'll get into the details of that in just a second, but I want to run my own business. What are the hot spots that you would give them advice wise right from the get go?
Oh man, the first thing right off the top of my head is you're going to have a work ethic. Period.
Yeah.
That has to come first, um, and then right next to that, you got to have drive. You got to stay motivated when nothing else works.
Yeah.
And without those two things, I think you kind of set yourself up for failure right out of the gate. I mean, and then educate yourself. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're jumping into, investing in, or buying, or starting from ground up, or starting from zero. You've got to educate. You've got to know that business as good or anybody else,
Hmm.
and by that, you got to know what the customer wants. You got to know what you're supplying. You got to know how to execute it. I mean, there's just so many different venues of knowing what you're doing. And by educate yourself, that may mean taking some online courses. That may mean going to an expo and setting in some classes. That's to me, that's what separates you in business. You get these businesses, and don't misunderstand me, by the way, I'm going to say this because I think somebody could take it wrong, but you get these businesses that are generational businesses. And yes, I know there's some of them guys, they work hard, and I won't use the word inherit. They buy them out and however, but you got to remember they have an established name.
Yeah.
When you're starting one from the ground up
Hmm.
or buying one that you had zero ties to, you're behind the eight ball real fast
Yeah.
because sometimes you don't know what you're buying.
Right.
And kind of getting into where I've kind of set myself up here to kind of divulge where we're at now. Because my wife and I done that very much so in 2019. But that would be kind of the three big points that I would set out to somebody. Um, know what you're buying, know the business or what you're starting. And confident. I would end with confidence on that. You got to be confident in what you're doing because people will see if you're not confident and you don't feel confident about yourself. How can they feel confident with you?
Sure.
And that to me, that's some of the big ones. I mean, there's a lot of things that I think go along with that, um, and I think there's a lot better people out there that could educate some people on better points than I can give. But my daughter, I'll share this story real quick. My daughter, she'll be mad at me for telling this. That's okay.
That's good.
She had an entrepreneurship class in high school, and she she learned a lot. I mean, she really did. But she come home one day, and my wife and I were all sitting together, and she said, "I don't know why I need this class." And my wife said, "Well, why not?" And she said, "Well, you guys are business owners. You guys know everything about how to run a business. I can learn from you guys." And I turned at her and I looked at her and I said, "Sis, let me tell you something right now. If we do it, you should probably do it the opposite way. That'd be the right way." Just sometimes you just and I get 100% where she was coming from on that. Just being raised around it. I mean, this kid she's along beside us on all the decisions. I mean, she's just with us all the time on anything we do, so she understands a lot. And she sees a lot, I guess I should say.
Hmm.
Not necessarily that she understands, but it kind of funny though, to see a 14-year-old that she's yeah, my parents yeah, no, we don't have it figured out either. We're just doing it one day at a time, like everybody else.
Sure. Well, let's go ahead and rip the curtain open here and tell us exactly what you do now, because I've never heard of this before, and it's really interesting, and we'll do a dive into it.
It's a very unique business, you know. So when I mentioned before that dirt work, excavation wasn't everything, wasn't where I wanted it to
Mm-hmm.
end everything. I had a pursued dream, I guess, would be to go back to some sort of excavation and concrete work. Again, it's what I was kind of born into, was raised up around. So I pursued a precast plant where we live. And everybody's probably saying, yeah, I know what precast is. I see a lot of that. But the business we pursued was not only a precast plant, but it was a burial vault company,
Hmm.
which is extremely, I'll use the word lucrative business. You don't ever, the business we're in now, we're kind of to be never seen, I guess is kind of the term I would use.
Okay.
I would the best way, the easiest way I can describe it to people that has seen any of the work that we do is when you go to a funeral. When you go to a funeral at the cemetery, you'll see the tent and chairs and setup, and maybe the burial vault and the chairs that you sit in, the grass and stuff like that. That's all the work of a burial vault company.
Hmm.
That is essentially subsidy to the funeral homes, and we work exclusively for the funeral homes. And that gets on a whole nother uh, personal level with families and grieving family. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, as well as being. We try to be perfect in doing that because it's a very personal business.
Yeah.
So I kind of got back into. We bought it. We bought an established business. It was established in 1969, right here locally in West Plains. Been around forever. I grew up about a half mile from this business, and I didn't even know what it was, to be honest. I didn't know the complete, the description of what this business did,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it was kind of learning as we went. I had the guys kind of had to show me some things because I had studied and done. I had done just like I was talking about a while ago. I had tried to educate myself as well as I could. And of course, and I will back up and say this. This is another big thing. If you're pursuing some sort of business career of entrepreneurship, if you're married, man, your spouse has to be 100% on board with you, or that you're
Yeah.
just setting yourself up for some big failures too. I'm a dreamer. My wife knows I'm a dreamer, and that is the cool thing about her. She has been one to stand right beside me and say, okay, let's do this. If you're dead set on it, let's do it. And she's been my rock, when that goes. And this was one of those. She didn't really know. There was kind of some stipulations. I couldn't go up there during the business hours to look at the business, just due to some other things. But so I had to find time, make time, and do it. And of course, that brings its own complications and stuff. And so again, we really didn't know what we was buying, but as we moved forward and we got it, we found a diamond in the rough, so to speak. I've met some really good other burial vault company owners, that are quite a ways away from us, but we, become friends with them, and they've showed me tricks and tricks of the trade, as people say, different ways of doing things, and it's a very, very unique business. Again, it's very personal.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I strive to all our employees now is when you do a funeral service, I want you to do it as you're doing it for your mom or your dad.
Yeah.
And that's very important to us. I want that family to feel like they was taken care of by family.
You said a minute ago that you have to be perfect when you do that, and you're dealing with people that are emotionally fragile. It's probably one of, if not the worst day of their life. And anything that goes wrong, it's what's the word? It's their emotions are just on their sleeves. And so you don't have the luxury of them kind of letting things go. And you really have to. Plus, you would want to. I don't want you to remember that one negative thing that happened on this day. You have enough going on,
Absolutely.
and you have to just get it right every time.
You know,
But
and I tell people this is kind of my little trick, I guess, that I've kind of
mhm.
learned to adapt to this environment with. If people don't remember the service
Oh yeah,
we've done our job,
right.
because nothing stood out. And like you just said, they're mourning, and it's a dreadful day.
Hmm.
If they don't remember it, then that means they was able to grieve. They was able to close that off. And that kind of I'm no I'm not getting into no deep psychological warfare on brains and stuff, like I'm just, in generally speaking, like
Sure.
so one of the services we provide is, if you buy a burial vault. We're a Doric franchise, DORC. I'll spell it right in a minute. But we're a franchised company. I mean, we're independently owned. I don't know how to say that right, but
Yeah.
um, we offer a franchised burial vault system service. And so one of the burial vaults is, of course, they're plastic on the center, and then they have plastic liner, and then we pour concrete around them. We finish them that way. And some are textured more than others, but I mean, we paint them, for kind of to be a little personal. And I mean, we paint essentially any color you can think of. If I can get the paint, I'll paint it. And
Hmm.
I get humored, and I say that lightly, but I get humored by talking to families I know personally after a funeral or so, and you can ask them, what color was that vault? I don't know, and it makes me feel good, and I say that very lighthearted. But that means we've done our job. That they didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, so everything went as a plan. Um,
Yeah,
of
you weren't
course,
a distraction.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And if and I tell people, when families request that we lower in front of the family, a lot of times we do all that stuff. We put your loved one in the ground after everybody leaves. Majority of the time,
Hmm.
if a family requests that we do it in front of them, and we do, um, I say it's Murphy's law. If it can, it will. That's usually when something goes wrong, and it doesn't a lot of times, but when it does, it's usually in front of the family. And you'll get the grave might cave off, or you'll have to take the vault back out of the hole and get it back up there, and
Oh
clean
my
it.
goodness.
Stuff happens.
Yeah.
Um, and we take extra care, and we do. And I've got a few cemeteries that we go to that I know the caretaker is going to stay and watch us bury, and we've become really good friends with a lot of them, because they've been done wrong some point in time, and there's a reason why, and I've got a few that I just go get a shovel off the truck and give to one of them, because I know he wants to put the first shovel of dirt on the grave. That's just his thing.
Hmm.
And you kind of learn to the people that you work for, even in that industry, and you treat them a little different. You again, it's really hitting more off them PR skills, in a different way, because you don't know how people are emotionally.
Yeah.
Um, and you've got to adapt to that on the fly, really. And we are blessed with a really good group of guys that are very caring, and the hardest part about our business, and I'm not bashful to tell about it at all, is I have a hard time bearing babies, and
Oh
that's,
yeah.
and again, like you can relate to this as far as firefighters. I know that's one of the big ones for firefighters too. Um, it's hard. It's hard to put a baby in the ground. That's just not the way the world was intended.
Yeah.
And it hurts. And it hurts me. And I don't even have to know the family or know them. And I've got a couple of guys that are really over the top when it comes to doing those kinds of funerals, and they really do a really good job for the families, and they make it very personal for them. And it's hard enough, and
Sure.
and and it's, kind of like you said, I had never heard anybody talk about a burial vault company before, and had some family that actually worked up there, and was kind of just, whether they talked about it or you just didn't ask about it because you just it's not something you see every day,
Yeah.
and of course now anytime I go somewhere, I'm looking at cemeteries on the side of the road, just to see how hard it'd be to get into that one. You find yourself doing things that you do,
Sure.
and but no, nonetheless, pursued this business for right at 2 years before we got it done. Kind of back to that God's timing thing, and it just kind of unique how it worked out. We had done some really big dirt work jobs, and it all hit just kind of accordingly. We got those finished up, and we was able to move forward in the purchase of this business. And um, my wife is I joke and tell everybody she's the boss because she's the bookkeeper, and my
Oh
guys
yeah.
all tell the same thing, and and she says, well, kind of make you the face because I'm a people person and I talk to people and I like people, and I'm a social butterfly, so to speak. And she and I tell everybody though the difference being she's a whole lot better to look at than I am. She'd be a better face for the company than I am.
We'll put her on the billboards, but you
That's
talk to the
right.
people
That's
then. There
right.
you
Absolutely.
go.
But I mean, and then on the other side, we manufacture septic tanks, and we do storm shelters, and we do cattle guards. Or no, I'm sorry, we don't do cattle guards. We do feed bunks and parking curbs and cattle waterers and stuff like that. We do a wide range of things, and that was, of course, the perseverance would be another thing I would say, kind of going forward. We bought this business in 2019 in January of 19, and so we had a full year of back to back of COVID, hard COVID,
Hmm.
and it was mind blowing on that business. Just uh, we was I had to hit the ground with my feet running, and I had to learn on the fly how to do a lot of things, um, and we done well. I mean, we done. Um, we set some record numbers as far as funerals go, and I hate to talk. It is a business, yes, but and I tell people, I tell my one liner joke has always been, we own a dying business, and it's kind of
You got
dark
to
and
have
twisted, I
humor.
know, but
You got to have humor in it. It's
you,
unfortunately death is just a part of life and you cannot escape it. But when you have people that are doing it in an empathetic and sympathetic, sensitive way for the family and for the person that's passed away, that's really that's all you can really ask for.
yeah, yeah,
I had
and
it. Go ahead.
go ahead.
Well, I had a question a minute ago. You were talking about the different things that you make with concrete, the
Yeah.
septic tanks and whatnot. The logistics of that. Do you have is it just forms that you have where you have a regular delivery of cement, or do you make it on site, or how does the creation of those different products that you make, how does that go?
So I'm gonna back up just a minute off that,
Okay.
and I'm gonna go backwards to go forwards, if that makes sense, and I think it will in
Sure.
just a second. But
Yeah.
so when we bought the business, we had an earthworm shop, 16 foot in the back wall, it was in the ground, and it come with a full functioning miniature batch plant.
Okay.
So we batched in house. We done everything. I mean, everything was right there, on site. We made all our own burial vaults. We made concrete boxes. We done all our own septics. I mean, we don't buy anything. I do now buy some pre-made parking curb forms, and then we pour them full of concrete, and then we sell them as a whole. But everything's made there. I mean, we're a manufacturing facility, so to speak, by a lot of ways. 2 years down the road, we went to 22 January of 22, January 25th. good friend of mine, deputy sheriff. He's now actually Howe County Sheriff Matt Roberts. He called me late one night and give me the detrimental news that no business owner wants to hear. Our business was on fire.
Oh.
And we lost everything other than our service trucks. And it was very hard, you know. Of course, my wife had COVID at the time, and it was just, you know, and of course, it's them things that gets instilled in your brain you'll never forget. You know, it was 17 degrees that night, and it was cold, and of course, you know, I get up there and I'm trying to fight fire with the firefighters, and kind of going back to a little bit of my on-site training, and I'm watching everything I've invested in, you know, that we have invested in, go up in flames, and it was very hard to overcome. You know, of course, I come home and I'm distraught. You know, we got families that depend on a paycheck. You know, just and my wife said, "Hey, where's my godly husband at? You know, where's the guy that always says God will take care of us? You know." And
Mm-hmm.
and it took my wife kind of slapping me upside the head.
They're good like that, aren't they?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think they wait for those opportunities. You know.
I think so too. Yeah, but I don't want to ruin your anniversary, so let's not go down that road.
But you know, I mean, like we kind of went back to the course, and you know, so there I can kind of tie it all back together now. Uh, I got to utilize a little bit of everything I've ever done in life. I kind of got to put it all together. Of course, my brother came, and I had some really good close friends that showed up the next day. What can we do? You know, well, guys, I can't do nothing. You know, and but a couple of weeks went by, and we built a rather large pad because our facility didn't have a really good level spot to build another shop, but we made one.
Hmm.
Another good friend of mine owns a welding shop. He ordered all our steel. We built a new shop. Of course, you know, I got to use my Boilermaking experience, and I called some Boilermakers in, some friends and some family. We welded all that thing up, and we done it all in house. And then I had some guys come in and do the tin work and stuff for us, but and of course, you know, I mean, it's kind of unique when you get a couple years down the road and you're able to turn around and look at it and think, man, you know, there's really no explanation of how all that come together and how that all actually worked. You know, and you got to kind of in my 2 cents, I just kind of got humbled by it and said, "Thank you, Lord," you know, because I know where it come from, and
Yeah,
kind of made the right steps along the way to get here. You know,
sure. It's
and,
times like that when you know who your friends are, they come out of the woodwork to help you
oh
out. That's
man, you know,
yeah,
and I mean, you know, and there's I'll kind of share. There's different kinds of friends. You know, like in business, you'll have business friends,
sure.
and you know, business friends are just as needed as family friends.
Mhm.
It was terrible. It was hard on us. You know, I mean, because we was just coming out of COVID. That's our time of year. We try to inventory everything up for winter. So we had a lot of inventory we lost. There was just lots and lots of different dynamics that hit us, you know, and friends and family. Man, we had a lot of businesses, a lot of close friends. I mean, we just had all kinds of outpouring love and support, you know, and people that didn't know how to do anything to help us. Well, what can we do to help, you know, and just offering help that they didn't even know, and that's just kind of makes you feel good about where you're from,
Mhm.
you know, and kind of makes you feel good about what you do. Because you know, I feel like at the end of the day, um, we must mean something. You know, I don't feel like you'd have the support you have.
Right.
Um, but you know, we overstepped that hurdle and we've kind of moved forward. So now, kind of back to your question there. Yeah, we had a batch plant in house. The concrete company here, they sold a ready mix truck, so we bought a ready mix truck, and we go get our own concrete now down at town.
Okay.
I just call them and let them know how much mud we need, and we go get it. And I mean, so kind of the same way. We're kind of set on their schedule a little bit now, but you know, I'm still using my own means to go get it, so to speak. And It works. It works both ways. It works well.
Sure.
You
Are
know,
the
you
vaults is that the bulk of your business, and the septic stuff is just kind of a supplemental deal, or are you kind of varied in everything?
So we kind of, when we bought the business, it was, I'm going to use the terms of about 80% burial vault, 20% precast. That was
Okay.
kind of the way the business was structured, so to speak.
Okay.
Um, and we've about changed that to 60/40, maybe.
Okay.
That's giving some rounded numbers, of course. I kind of strive to get it to 50/50. I really like precast. I like concrete work. I like the challenge of it. Uh, I like the being able to manipulate it. Of course, I've got some good friends they're actually in outside concrete work. They'll pour your basement walls and flats and
Hmm.
your all your concrete for your house and business or whatever. Of course, I talk to them on a pretty regular basis. And they're they're kind of complaining this time of year because they can't work. And I say, hey, buy one that's in a shop. You can work every day. And so we've kind of joked around back and forth there, but it never ends for us. Uh, there's always something to pour, something to make, and but yeah, I mean, so the dynamic of our business is first and foremost is the burial vault side. I mean, that's because you don't know when you're going to get funerals. That's the hard part about this business, and that's the hard part about manning. Having manpower for this business. There's a lot of overtime. There's a lot of unexpected Saturdays,
I
unexpected
hadn't
Sundays.
I hadn't thought about that. What type of notice do you get? You're kind of maybe not at the whim of the the funeral homes, but you probably don't get a lot of notice about when you're ready to be used, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of back and forth there. I mean, we'll get anywhere from 3 days notice to very rarely do we get anything less than 24-hour notice.
Okay.
But it does happen. I mean, we've gotten calls at 9 o'clock in the morning for a 12 o'clock funeral, or you're kind of scrounging around to make things happen. We service a 100-mile radius.
Oh wow.
So
Okay.
I mean, from West Plains, uh, we go to Houston, Missouri, to Winona, Summersville, Poplar Bluff. We go not real regular, but we do go to Poplar Bluff, Doniphan, uh, Melbourne, Batesville, Arkansas. I mean, we make a big circle, and I get guys stretched out that are 150 miles apart at times, and that's the one thing you dread when one of them calls and says they had a blowout or something.
Oh
You just
yeah.
you jump in the truck, take spares with you. You just go do it and just kind of overcome it one day at a time. But so I mean, we always have to have barrel vaults on the ready. Because you get the extreme circumstances where the family may want to do like a direct burial where they don't want to have any embalming and stuff like that. Missouri law and Arkansas law states that you've only got so many hours to do that. Um,
Oh, okay.
so I mean, you're limited there, and there's things on that that's just it's kind of hard. It makes it difficult, and but you kind of learn to overcome it. And that's the other thing. You people sometimes will see the obituaries and look at them and stuff like that, and kind of goes in one ear and out the other. And then when you're in the business, like we'll get a Saturday, we may have 7, 8 funerals on the board for a Saturday, and so you're kind of running around ragged. And I can remember early on when we first get it, you get 2 or 3 a day. You're looking at that. Oh yeah, we can handle that. And then you get 7, 8, 9 a day, and you think, well, how are you going to do that? Five of them same time.
Oof.
You just gotta. And I used to freak out and jump up and down and get all flustered. And as I've matured and kind of gathered the reins a little tighter and a little better and kind of adapted to my environment, I just kind of look at it. I'm gonna figure this out. We may have to go drop some vaults off, set them over the hole, do stuff. You
Hmm.
just go. You figure out a way to go make it work.
How many people do you have working for you now? I mean, I know you've probably grown, but with with those kind of numbers, you probably have a pretty decent crew.
So there's there's seven of us,
Okay.
uh, counting myself, eight counting my wife. There's six of us full time. I mean, all the time.
Okay.
Then I've got a guy that comes and helps on the weekends. He worked for me for quite a while. He helps on the weekends, and he'll take some PTO and help us during the week if we get real busy. Um, he went. He had an opportunity to go work for a city. Had a city job, and I told him, I said, "Dude, you're you're kind of foolish not to. They got better benefits and better
Sure.
things like that." And but he still comes and helps, and all the guys like him and stuff like that. So he's kind of a huge help when he comes, because you don't have to worry about him. He knows how to do everything.
Yeah. I I'm going to go off on just a little side note here. When you pour that vault, are they reinforced with steel? And is there a standard size for a vault? Because I know some caskets, depending on if it's unfortunately a child or a young person versus an adult, some people are larger than others. I didn't know if there was an industry standard, so to speak, or does it depend on the graveyard, how much room they have? How does that all kind of play out?
So yeah, kind of a few things there. I mean, so of course, now we have the cremations, and so I mean, we'll dig a cremation hole too, and
Oh,
do
okay.
those. But standard, like their standard, we do a regular size vault, and then we do an oversized vault, and then for children and stuff like that, we still use a regular size vault for. But and then below that, when you get back into the babies and stuff like that, we have a different line that we carry. It's kind of they're all in one casket vault combo.
Okay.
Um, and a lot of the funeral homes will supply those, but we get them too, and I do supply some of the funeral homes with those.
Hmm.
That's kind of of course, that just and I've told our rep a few times. I said, I wish that this side of the business would go out of business. And she said, "Well, why is that?" And I said, "Because I hate burying babies. Just it goes
Yeah.
back to the need of them. I just wish we didn't have a need for them."
Yeah.
But and then of course, like when we dig graves, we a standard grave, is not 6 foot. Everybody thinks they're 6 foot deep, but we dig most of our graves around 54 to 56 inches deep. Uh,
Really?
yeah, that's just kind of the from all the other helpful grave diggers that I've run across. That's kind of the common average number, so to speak. Um,
Where did the 6 foot come from? Is that in the olden days when they were just in a pine box kind of thing, or?
I think so, and I mean, there's as I've learned being in some of these older cemeteries. I think 6 foot was a misconception to a lot of people. There's a lot of graves that are not 40 inches deep. There's a lot of graves.
My goodness.
Uh, but when you had to hand dig them,
Well, sure.
um, of course they had the stories we get is they hand dug them. They had a kind of like a digging party. A whole bunch of men would go out and shovels and picks and they'd take turns digging. And I think of it now like it would take us a week to dig a grave by hand.
Especially in Missouri or
Yeah,
yeah, go to Nebraska and you can dig a 6 foot hole in an hour and a half. But
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. One of our other reps, he's from Florida, and he had a burial vault company down there. And he said when I first moved up here, he said I thought you guys was crazy, and he said we had a little tractor we used to fill graves with. He said we dug everything by hand because it was all sand.
yeah,
I said, of course you did. Yeah, and so I mean, there's some different sizes, and of course, we carry different lines of vaults, and uh, we get into a double line or a triple line, and I mean, we even carry like a stainless steel vault, and I mean, they're beautiful, but I'll be honest, they're kind of overkill for for the purpose.
Sure.
And
What is the thickness of the concrete wall on a vault? What are the typical dimensions?
so like our outside measurements, are like 96 inches long, 36 inches wide. We're right at 3 foot wide. Concrete's about 2.5 inches thick all the way around. The lid's about 5.5 inches thick. So they're a little bit top heavy,
What is it?
and
What do they
go
typically
ahead.
weigh?
So they're right at um, they're let me back up on that. They're just a little bit over a half a yard of concrete. So they're they're around 2,500 pounds to 3,000 pounds.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And when we go to the cemetery, majority of the time we unload them off the side of the truck with we use a vault dolly. Now there's other companies, they'll use a vault buggy, or there's different things that you can use to transport the vaults and stuff. But we use a dolly off the side of the truck, and we've got some long ramp boards, and we drive them down the side of the truck and over to the hole. And
Hmm.
people look at us all the time like, how do you move that much? And it's just, you're using power tools. I mean, essentially.
Yeah.
But I had a guy tell me early on, he was an old timer from another vault company, that there's everything you need to get the job done on that truck, and if you can't do it, it's because you're not trying. And as time goes on, I kind of wonder if sometimes this next generation, they may not have the capabilities of doing
Yeah. What you show up, do you dig the hole, or does the graveyard or the funeral or whoever manages the property, do they dig the hole? You do
So
everything?
we do both. I mean, I
Okay.
don't dig. I dig here locally. There's a couple of cemeteries that I'm the only one that can dig at, but
Hmm.
of course that's. And then we've got grave diggers that we know, that service other parts of our area that we go to, and of course, we do everything to make their life as easy as possible. We stick around, help them fill the grave, and make them look good. Because I mean, at the end of the day, we're not doing this for our company. We're not doing it for the grave digger. We're not doing it for the funeral home. We're doing it for that family. I mean,
Yeah.
really, to be honest about it. Um, and we want it to look as good as we can. And this time of year with snow on the ground, but like last week when it was so muddy and nasty and wet, it's hard. It's hard on us. It's nasty. It's wet.
Yeah.
You make tracks everywhere you go. You take a backhoe in the cemetery, you got a plyboard in, plyboard out.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
You break plyboard and you still make a mess. You can't make the mound on the grave look good. There's just a lot of things that, um, and then we always try to go back before Memorial Day and try to dress everything up and make it look good.
Oh, when you've dug a hole and then you've put everything in the hole that's supposed to go in there in it, you covered it up, you have the mound. Do you put grass seed in there to have it quickly come back to be not just dirt?
No, generally we
Okay.
don't. But,
All right.
and that's kind of the other thing. Most of the cemeteries locally anymore have either got Bermuda grass or zoysia grass in the
Oh,
cemeteries now.
spreads pretty quick then.
Yeah, and I mean, and honestly, within a summer, usually one summer, the grave will be settled, and grass will be getting back. It may not be real thick, but usually by 2 years you can't hardly tell that there's a grave there, other than a
Okay.
headstone. But I've had a couple families call and ask about putting grass seed and stuff down, but the problem is when you fill the grave, it's going to settle.
Sure.
And sometimes the ground is just funny. Sometimes it takes more dirt, sometimes it takes less dirt. Um, you just don't really know how much you need, and so that's one of the things that we always try to do is when we go back, we try to rake all the rocks off the top and get them out, and take them back to the dirt pile and stuff like that. Try to make it look more presentable when we go back after it's had a little chance to settle. And of course, then by the next time we go back, there's usually something going on where they've had some grass growing back over to it by then, or something like that.
Does your line of work, when you're working with funeral homes and whatnot, are there any kind of special licenses or certifications that you have to either get or maintain to do this line of work? Or, I mean, I know you have your business license and certain permits for just dirt work and whatnot, equipment and everything. But do you have anything specific to the funeral home industry or the burial industry?
So yeah, there's a few things there. Like us with our franchise. Um, we had to have a franchise agreement. Um, so we've got that. That's how we were able
Mm,
to carry the Doric vault line,
okay.
their product, and then you've got the National Burial Vault Association. It's not required, but it's highly um, it's highly advisable. It's a good thing to have. I mean, they're kind of in your back pocket. They kind of help represent you a little bit. And then other than that, really, I mean, yes and no on some things. Depending on like the state of Missouri, each state's just a little bit different, but you're supposed to have a funeral director with a director's license to be present until you put the body in the ground.
Okay.
Um, there's just kind of some different things. We get calls all the time about wanting us to bury somebody and they don't want to go through the funeral home. And uh, I just don't do it. I would love to work for the general public in that aspect, but at the same hand, it's not really really good business to get into. As far as um, you could get yourself in trouble real fast.
Yeah.
You could because what proof do you have? There's just more documentation you'd have to keep and stuff like that. And of course, I mean, we keep files on everybody we bury and stuff like that. I mean, we're
By the book.
pretty much, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there's not much that we, and I don't know how you would, I just we don't because you never know. I mean, that's kind of the funny thing. You just never know. I mean, we've had to go move some people, and that's a whole nother job in itself, and
Hmm.
I don't like that at all. I just that bothers me. I'll just be honest.
Yeah. I
I've kind of
would I would really wonder if somebody called me and said, "Can you help me bury a body?" I mean,
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of jokes there, but in all seriousness, if someone just said, "I don't want to do a funeral home or anything, I just want to bury a body," you're going to get questions. That's red flags, but
Oh, absolutely. I
yeah,
mean, we've had a few. I'm going to say extreme circumstances where we've buried a spouse with just the husband, but we've had the coroner there, and we had a funeral director there. I mean, um, and they both worked for the funeral home or for a funeral home. So that, I mean, that kind of helped.
yeah,
It just kind of made it all one. But I mean, we've done some odd stuff like that. But the other side of that being, you build a reputation with the funeral homes you service,
sure,
and I don't. At the end of the day, I don't ever want them to think that I'm trying to do their business too, because I'm not.
yeah,
I
kind of
want them
staying in your
to
lane.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. I want them to rely on me, and I will rely on them. And
hmm
I will be in their corner anytime they need me. That's and
if if someone wanted to, maybe follow in your footsteps, whether it would be doing this type of thing and franchising somewhere else in the United States, or if they wanted to do dirt work or something in the same kind of lane that you're currently in, what types of soft skills do you find are really advantageous to be successful?
oh man, one probably right off the top of my head, I would say you're going to have some background of knowledge of what you're doing.
Hmm.
Does that mean you got to have 20 years experience? No, that's not what I'm saying. That's kind of like me. To be honest, I grew up. I've poured a lot of concrete growing up. But precast is different. It truly is. And it kind of, back to your question, and I don't know that I ever answered it fully for you. Most of our stuff is in actual pre-made forms.
Okay.
So I mean, it's getting it ready, putting form oil in it, and then pouring it. A business such as ours, a lot of the burial vault companies are just that. Majority of them don't have a precast side too. We're kind of unique. Well, there's a couple of us that I know real close that are unique like that. But at these annual meetings and stuff, you meet these other guys. They just provide funeral services, or just manufacture vaults and send them to another warehouse, or I mean, they're just, uh, we've kind of dipped into more of the concrete world, I guess. But to have some knowledge of what, you kind of got to know what kind of batch you need. You got to know, um, you got to have an angle, of some sort. Yeah, some of that can be learned on the fly. Some of it can be real fast on the job training. Some of it could be, a couple of weeks beforehand before you do something. I mean, but a lot of that's going to go back to a little bit of knowing what you're doing, a little PRing, um, and of course, in another angle that I would urge anybody to get into, it would be, if that's something that you might pursue, to find somebody, that a lot of these businesses like ours are, I won't use the term generational, but they're getting into that time frame where they're ready. They're the end of the baby boomer era.
Yeah.
I mean, there's another company 100 miles south of us. Him and I are a year apart in age, and he bought his uncle out, and but him and I both got boots on the ground, kind of, so to speak, and him and I are a lot alike in a lot of ways. But anybody we deal with, him and I are the two youngest in this business, and so I mean, there's fixing. I feel like it's kind of coming with the rest of the trade world. There's fixing to be a big age gap in what the next generational owners are going to be.
I've seen a lot of articles just over the last few years about it's coming, where the guys that have all the experience and that know what they're doing, they're either moving on to teaching or they're just leaving the workforce and retiring. And you can look at it as a huge problem, or you can also look at it as a huge opportunity if you're willing to get in there. Folks, I have found when I talk to people about being on this podcast, you find a lot of older folks that are more than happy to share their knowledge and experience with folks because they want to help you be successful. They're leaving. They're more than happy to share all that they've learned if you're willing to listen.
Yeah. I found that a lot in the Boilermakers, and kind of one thing I left out that I just kind of feel the need now to share is, my grandfather was a local tin iron worker, and he retired out of the iron workers, and then he went back to work for the Boilermakers, and so I mean, I had some uncles and stuff like that in the union as well, and that's kind of the angle. I didn't necessarily use that, but it helped. But and a lot of them old timers that I call now knew my grandpa, and
Mm-hmm.
it was unique to be two generations younger and to hear them telling stories of my grandpa when he was my age, and telling things of him, because he's gone. He passed away in 2011, and so I mean, he's been gone some time now, and it's kind of good to walk down kind of the same path, to see how that all happened. But but them old timers, so I mean, they had so much skill and knowledge that somebody taught them,
Sure.
and a lot of them, our generation called them guys, this kind of old grouches, old butts, and stuff like that. But most of them just was kind of hardened that way. It wasn't because that's really what they were. That's just kind of how they got brought up, and that's kind of who they become because they had to be.
Mm-hmm.
But if you showed some initiative and didn't make them work as hard because they was older, and they would show you tricks. Hey, pup, or whatever. They'd show you different things, and man, that's a lot easier, and kind of just like you said, they was more than willing if you was willing to put the work in.
Yeah, if you're teachable. That's one thing that I hear a lot of older folks comment on the younger generations is you got to check your ego at the door and come in willing to learn. It's fine if you know things, but there's a lot you don't know, and you might find a lot of people that have forgotten more than you already know.
Absolutely.
So, you know, be willing to learn and be teachable, and you can probably learn a lot.
I mean, there's a lot of truth to that, and that's it's one thing to be sure of yourself,
Yeah.
but and then you cross the line when you're arrogant.
Yeah, confident but not arrogant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there is so much truth to that. And I jokingly say a lot of times I kind of walk the line on both of those, but and it's not because I'm not better than anybody by no means. But I have found that you're a better leader when you're confident in what you're leading your guys to do.
Mm-hmm.
And and of course, when I started getting a little bit further up the chain in the Boilermakers and pushing some work, that was the first thing that I really, really made sure I did. You can't ask your guys to do something you're not willing to do first.
Sure.
And I apply that in this business as well. I mean, if there's something that needs to be done, if we got to get down in the mud, I'll grab a shovel and I'll be the first one down there. Um, you know, you, a good leader leads by example, and by no means am I saying I'm the best leader or a good leader. I just get up every day and I try. And,
Yeah.
and I'm sure I've got my own faults and I've got plenty of them, but um, we get up, we try every day, and we try to make it successful, and too stubborn not to be.
What when you keep getting up and you keep trying, there is the reality that sometimes no matter how much you try, you're going to fail. What is your advice on how to deal with failure?
So my 2 cents on failure has been a kind of a hard knot lesson that I myself have learned, but because with any success comes failure first.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned I don't like it, and it doesn't mean I like it, but I've learned that failure is just another lesson.
Yeah.
And if you're truly sincere about giving it 100% effort, or as we was raised, it was 110%. You had to give a little bit more than just 100.
Yeah.
But and you gave it your all, and yet you didn't succeed. It's not always a loss, and it's kind of looking at that glass half full or half empty. Now, I get called negative Nancy a lot, and I look at the opposite side of things, but in life in general, I only fail when I quit,
Yeah.
and that's kind of my mindset. Doesn't mean I'm right, but I'll if I didn't succeed first, it doesn't mean it's completely over. And that's and I use the term, and I'll use it lightly, but stubbornness. I think stubbornness is a good trait as far as that goes. Now you can be too stubborn, and I sometimes
Sure.
am, for sure. Sometimes I'd rather run my head through a wall than just to say I can. But if again, and I try to remind myself that daily, really do. Failure doesn't mean that you failed. and that's, I think that becomes a misconception to a lot of people. Well, it didn't work. Well, okay. Well, why didn't it work? I mean, break it down and see what the reasoning was, and see what if you break things down and find an isolated number of problems, fix those and try it again.
Sure.
Um, it's kind of learning to adapt to your environment in in a good way. Not in a bad way, in a good way. Um, but I truly believe that in a lot of cases, failure is just another lesson.
Yeah.
And
I've used the acronym on here before. It's fail is just first attempt in learning.
that's
And
it.
I think my dad was the one that told me that. I don't think he came up with it necessarily, but it was some good advice. Tenacity can really take you a long way, and it's good to be driven. The older I've gotten, I like to think anyway, maybe I'm fooling myself, but I like to think I'm getting a little bit better about stopping and realizing, okay, I don't have to go through the wall. Maybe there's a way to go around it. You work smarter, not harder, kind of a thing. You get tired of failing, and so you get better at stopping and analyzing it more to figure out the best route to go around it.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. When you saying that, an older gravedigger, he's been digging graves for 36 years for us down in Arkansas, and good friend of mine. He's kind of got a really cool story too in himself. He played college basketball, and he's 6'5". He played with Scottie Pippen.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, he knows some people, and it just another day on the basketball court for him. Just to
Hmm.
going to college to be a basketball coach. That's what he went to college for. Anyway, long and short, he's a gravedigger, and a really good one at that. But him and I got to discussing one day in the cemetery, just hanging out, waiting on a funeral to get over. We was talking about life in general, and he shared with me something, and I've thought a lot about it as I'm approaching 40, But he said when you're 16 to 20 years old, he said, you see a trailer, you don't even put your hand on the deck, you just jump up on a trailer and get what needs to be got and jump off the trailer. He said, from that 21 to 35-year old, he said, you might put a hand up there and kind of hop up on the trailer. And then, when you get over that 35-year-old mark, you might put your butt up on the trailer and kind of spin around. And then he said, then when you get smart, when you get in your up to your 50s, he said, you put the ramp down, you walk up the ramp and get what needs to be getting got.
I'm a little bit I relate to that more than I'd like to admit. So that is spot on. And you know what, I picked up on something just a second ago. What's really unique about your job, and I've said this about the fire service, is that you have these experiences that unless you're in that line of work, nobody can really relate to some of the things that you will see in those little mental snapshots in your mind. But you were just talking about how you're standing in a graveyard having a conversation with a guy who played with Scottie Pippen. I mean, that you can't really, that's just not in the brochure. You know what I mean? And those are the types of things that make this line of work so unique. And you just can't really explain what it's like to people.
Exactly. I mean, and truly, you never know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Yeah.
You never know who's going to show up. And I don't say that for fame, to see somebody famous or nothing like that, but
Hmm.
or what kind of story is going to be told. And that's what the guys come back to the shop all the time talking about. World War II guys, and they've told a story about what they've done or create. And I mean, and my hat's off to military, man.
Hmm.
That's you talking about getting me jerking my heartstrings. I mean, we've got our freedom because of them guys.
Sure.
And, and I mean, that's like when we get, and this is really a pointless little story, but I just always think about the guys that come from the, oh shoot, they do the military honors, on cemeteries, and they come do a 21 gun salute. And I mean, these guys are
Yeah.
all old, retired. They go they drive an old VFW van down,
Hmm.
and I mean, shoot, these guys, they don't have nothing better to do, so to speak. And I had one of our new guys with me. It's been a couple of years ago now, and they got out of the van, and I mean, they're, they've all got hearing aids in, and two of them's got canes, and
Hmm.
they're broke down old men, And he said, "My gosh, look at them old men." I said, "Man," I said, "Here's what I see." I said, "I see some 21-year-old BAs, and I think everybody knows what that term is, but
Yeah.
that signed up to go to the military and fight for this country." And I said, "We're seeing the after effects."
Yeah.
Not what, and I said, I try to look at them guys at who they were, and how they, and what they've done. And man, they get, and that's just one of them things. It's kind of like sitting in an old coffee shop. When them guys get there, they'll get to the cemetery an hour and a half early, and they'll get to joking around and telling stories. And if you care about history at all, you better listen, because they're going to tell something
Sure.
that's interesting,
Yeah.
and I've kind of learned to, as I've been in this business a few years now, that you may not take every bit of it with a grain of salt, but some of it, you do. Man, stuff like that, just, and then of course, then you get the preachers that talk about the guys that try to set the world on fire for Christ and stuff like that, and it just, again, you never know what kind of story or something that's going to be shared the next time at a funeral or at the cemetery, and it's a very humbling and thankful experience that we're right here in the middle of it. Not that I'm somebody at all, but I
You
get to listen to that.
Well, yeah, and that is really unique because you can think of anybody that runs through your mind, any famous person, an athlete, a movie star, a musician, some social media, whatever, anybody that you can think of that you would hold up in high regard or is really famous or wealthy or whatever. They are someone in your line of work is going to encounter them at some point or another. There's one thing that we can never escape, and that's death. And
Absolutely.
you're going to be able, so it kind of puts it all in perspective and kind of makes you prioritize things a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that's the most humbling saying that I can't say saying, maybe a phrase or meme or however you want to say it now.
Hmm.
And coming from someone that digs graves, you know, I don't care how much money you got in your bank account. I don't care how little money you got in your bank account.
Yep.
When I do when we dig a grave and provide a funeral, it's the same. And
Sure.
I don't treat you differently on status, and I don't treat you differently if you've got 300 people there, or 10. You was just as important to somebody as you was the next one. And it just, uh, I've learned that everybody has a story. Some may not be real pleasant,
Sure.
uh, and some you may not want to hear. Some you may want to sit and you want to hear more of. But in this line of business, you get to hear the good and the bad and the ugly, just to kind of bank that trio up there. Uh, but like you said, yeah, I mean, all roads end, and
Yep.
unfortunately, it's just the way of the world.
Hmm.
And
Well, I will say this, after talking with you about this line of work that I really didn't know anything about, I really am glad that there are people like you that are out there that make that final moment as, say, special, and the kindness that I'm getting from you is something that would be conveyed to the family. That empathy, that respect, that honor that you're giving the most famous person down to somebody that nobody knew.
yeah,
That's really the ultimate kindness that you can do, and the respect that you can provide. So I tip my hat to you on that. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today about such a unique career. It's really a very interesting story.
absolutely, I have enjoyed it. You don't get to in this business, you don't get to share this much. I don't know if it's kind of frowned. I don't know. It's not something that gets shared a whole lot, and it's kind of cool to tell the story of this business.
Yeah.
Um, in a couple of ways, it kind of opens up a little bit of light of perspective on what the business is, and two, yeah, the humbleness. At the end of the day, I say this to a lot of people. I loved my time boiler making. Um, I did, and I miss the work, and I miss the guys, and I miss that atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
But as much as I loved it, I really love providing a personal service better.
Yeah.
And and I know I've used the term 100 times. I'm going to use it again. It's just a humbling experience to be a part of something like that, and again, I know it's not always good or pleasant or perfect. But when you hit it, 10 out of 10,
Mm-hmm.
and you score perfect, and you see, and the family comes and they really thank you for the service you provided, and everything, and of course the funeral home is included in all that, and it just really makes you feel good that you provided something for some closure.
Yeah.
And it's a unique feeling, and again, the best word I know to describe it is just it's humbling, because just it goes back to people loving people, and we
Yeah.
need more of that.
Well, there's so many jobs, and that's kind of the premise behind this podcast is there's a million jobs and there's people out there doing it that you don't even really know. Sometimes we don't realize that that's even a job, that's a thing. And
Yeah,
someone might gravitate towards that because they want to be of service to others or they want to help others. And there's a million different ways that you can help people because there's so many different stages of life. And what you deal with is the final stage. It's a difficult one, but we have people like you out there doing that. So I tip my hat to you. I'll probably need your services. Hopefully it's years down the road, but we all will at some point. And I'm glad that people like you with your mindset are out there doing it.
well, I appreciate it. I really am humbled by your dedication and drive to get out and find, get on the boots, and find people like this, and to reach the outreach. I've enjoyed listening to your podcast and everything you're bringing to the table. And I mean, it's unique and it's cool. And I mean, it's a different, and I know you have said this even, but it's a different type of podcast. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you're bringing different aspects to light, that people can hear about. And that's unique in itself.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks for your time today, Chase. I really do appreciate it. This was a fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed myself.
Tim, thank you. Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed sharing, and hope all is well, man.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of the Jobs Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully you found that interesting. As always, I wait until the end of an interview to ask you to like, subscribe, and share. I feel it's important that I earn that support from you. Thanks again, and we will see you on the next one.